Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something we've all experienced being taught, but we're looking at it, through the lens of those doing the teaching in higher education. You shared with us a really comprehensive guide for college instructors, and well, it turns out the principles of effective learning it covers are incredibly insightful for anyone who's ever tried to learn something new, which, let's face it, is everyone.
That's right. Yeah, even if you're not an educator, understanding the mechanics of how learning works and how instructors can set the stage can be surprisingly useful. Our source material dives into pretty much everything from the initial design of a course to, the nuances of student motivation and the challenges of teaching diverse learners.
Exactly. And for you, our listener, who wants to get a solid understanding of complex topics without, getting lost in academic jargon, this is your shortcut. We've sifted through the details to bring you the key actionable ideas and those aha moments about effective learning environments and the student experience. Our mission today is to understand what really makes learning stick and how educators can make that happen more effectively. So let's get started.
Absolutely. Let's begin with course preparation and that often underestimated document, the syllabus. Most of us probably just see it as a schedule and a list of rules.
Guilty as charged. I mean, I always just flip to the grading breakdown and the due dates. Really.
Well, yeah, and our sources highlight that the syllabus actually serves a powerful dual purpose. It's definitely a contract, right?
Yeah.
Outlining expectations, learning goals, the roadmap for the course. Think of it as the instructor saying, here's what we're going to do and why.
So it's about setting shared expectations up front. And this planning, we learned, ideally happens about a month before the course even begins. That feels like a lot of lead time.
Well, that early planning allows instructors to really think through the content and, crucially, how students will actively engage with it each week. When mapping out the semester, considering different teaching methods beyond just lecturing, things like discussions or cooperative learning activities that can really boost student interest, offering some flexibility in assignments can also tap into individual students' strengths and motivations.
Okay, giving students some say in how they demonstrate their learning, that makes sense for buy-in. Now, you mentioned a second purpose of the syllabus as a learning tool itself. How does that work?
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. The syllabus can actually communicate the instructor's philosophy about learning. For students encountering a subject for the first time, even, seemingly straightforward material can feel daunting. By including helpful resources, perhaps links to relevant websites, study strategy tips, or even advice on when and how to seek help, the syllabus transforms from just a static document into, a dynamic guide for navigating the course successfully. Imagine a syllabus that proactively includes links to mental health resources, that subtly communicates the instructor's care for student well-being beyond just academic performance.
Wow, embedding those kinds of resources sends a really powerful message. It's about teaching students how to learn in your specific field, not just the content itself. Now let's shift to the learners themselves. Our sources stress the importance of understanding their existing knowledge and what gets them motivated. That sounds obvious, but how do instructors actually do that effectively?
You're right. Understanding prior knowledge is fundamental. It's like trying to build a house without knowing the foundation, isn't it? Instructors can use simple strategies at the beginning of a course to gauge where everyone is starting. Asking students about their previous experience with the subject, perhaps through a quick show of hands or a brief, ungraded survey, can be really informative.
You could also use short, low-stakes quizzes on foundational concepts, or even just list key topics and have students rate their familiarity with each. This helps tailor instruction and identify students who might benefit from additional support or, more challenging material.
It's like taking a temperature reading of the room academically. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's motivation, the engine that drives learning.
Mm.
We've got intrinsic motivation, doing something for the pure enjoyment, and extrinsic motivation, driven by rewards like grades. How do these play out in the classroom? Exactly. Students who are extrinsically motivated are focused on external rewards. But the research is clear. Intrinsic motivation, that internal drive stemming from curiosity or a love of the subject, leads to deeper engagement, more creativity, and a greater willingness to tackle challenging problems. Intrinsically motivated students are more likely to use effective learning strategies, like connecting new information to what they already know.
So the pleasure of learning actually makes you a better learner. That's a positive feedback loop we want to encourage. How can instructors actually spark that intrinsic interest?
Well, one key way is for instructors to model their own passion for the subject. When you genuinely convey your enthusiasm, it can be contagious. Interestingly, motivation can also evolve. What starts as extrinsic, say, a student working hard for a good grade can, over time, lead to a genuine interest in the material itself. While relying solely on external rewards might sometimes undermine intrinsic motivation, they can be a useful starting point, especially when introducing new or less inherently exciting topics. It's about finding the right balance.
That makes sense. A stepping stone to deeper engagement. Now, our sources also discuss different types of goals students might have. Mastery goals versus performance goals. What's the difference and why does it matter?
Right. Students with mastery goals are primarily focused on learning and improving their understanding. They tend to embrace challenges and view mistakes as learning opportunities. Students with performance goals, on the other hand, are more concerned with demonstrating their competence and, well, outperforming their peers. While a desire to do well is natural, a strong performance orientation can sometimes lead to anxiety and a reluctance to take risks. Course design that emphasizes learning and growth over direct competition, perhaps through grading policies that reward effort and revision, can really foster a mastery mindset.
So setting up the course to value the learning journey as much as the final outcome. How can instructors translate these motivation theories into actual classroom practice? Give us some concrete examples we can visualize.
Okay, well, providing students with choices in their assignments, maybe letting them select research topics, or even the format of their final project that can significantly increase their sense of ownership and control. Making the relevance and value of the course material explicit is also crucial. Don't just assign a reading. Explain why it's important and how it connects to their interests or future goals. Encouraging revision in written work, perhaps separating feedback from the grade on initial drafts, shifts the focus from just getting a grade to actually mastering the material. Imagine allowing students to choose between a traditional research paper and creating a podcast episode to demonstrate their understanding. That kind of flexibility can really boost engagement.
Those are really practical ideas that make learning feel more personal and less like a mandate. Now let's move to something that can make or break a class: discussions. When they work, they're fantastic, but when they don't, well, it can be painful. What are some of the common roadblocks to effective classroom discussions?
Unfortunately, yeah, many instructors face the issue of passive students, those who rarely or never contribute. Some students might feel unprepared, fear being judged for their comments, or simply not see the value in verbalizing their thoughts in a group setting. There can also be a tendency for discussions to gravitate towards finding the right answer the instructor is looking for, rather than exploring diverse perspectives.
I've definitely been in those discussions where you feel like you're playing a guessing game with the professor's mind. Go
Yeah.
on. Beyond just shyness, why else might students be reluctant to jump in?
Well, a key factor is often the perception that they're not actually learning anything substantial during the discussion. They might feel like it's just a sharing of opinions without any real intellectual growth. Cultural norms can also play a significant role. In some cultures, direct participation in class discussions might be less common or even discouraged. It's also worth acknowledging that instructors themselves can sometimes inadvertently stifle discussion, perhaps by dominating the conversation or being too quick to correct students.
That's a good reminder that the instructor's role is really to facilitate, not to control. So what are some actionable strategies for drawing out those quieter students and making discussions more inclusive?
Setting clear expectations for participation from the very beginning is important. Explain why discussion is a valuable part of the learning process, how it helps solidify understanding and develop critical thinking skills. But beyond that, employ specific techniques. Asking general feeling questions that don't have a right or wrong answer can be a good way to ease students into the conversation. For example, asking what resonates with you most about this reading can be less intimidating than asking for a specific analysis. You can also use techniques like think, pair, share, where students first think individually about a question, then discuss it with a partner before sharing with the whole class. This gives everyone a chance to formulate their thoughts in a lower pressure environment.
Think, pair, share. That's a great way to build confidence before speaking in front of a larger group. What about when disagreements arise during a discussion? How can instructors manage those constructively?
Disagreement is a natural part of intellectual exploration and shouldn't be shut down. In fact, it can be a powerful learning opportunity. When students become entrenched in opposing viewpoints, a really effective technique is to ask them to temporarily switch sides and argue the opposing perspective. This forces them to consider different angles and can lead to a deeper understanding of the issue's complexity. It's also crucial to periodically summarize the key points and progress of the discussion. This helps students see how their contributions fit into the larger conversation and what has been accomplished.
So, guiding the conflict towards understanding rather than just winning. Now, with the rise of online learning, discussions often happen in a digital space. What are some specific considerations for facilitating effective online discussions?
Right. Online discussions offer flexibility and can provide a space for more thoughtful responses, as students have time to compose their thoughts. They can also be less intimidating for students who are hesitant to speak up in person. However, the lack of face-to-face interaction can sometimes lead to misunderstandings or a less personal feel. It's essential to establish clear expectations for online discussions, perhaps through a rubric that outlines what constitutes a thoughtful and respectful contribution. Building a sense of community in the online environment is also vital, encouraging students to respond to each other and fostering a welcoming atmosphere. Remind students that while it's an online space, the principles of respectful discourse still apply.
Setting those digital ground rules is key.
Yeah.
Now let's pivot to another cornerstone of higher education, the lecture. Often seen as a passive experience, but our sources offer some interesting ways to make them more impactful. How do you grab students' attention right from the start?
The beginning of a lecture. It's your prime opportunity to pique curiosity. You want to create what we might call a knowledge gap, highlighting something students don't know or challenging a common misconception. Asking a compelling question before you dive into the content can really focus their attention and get them thinking. For example, if you're about to lecture on memory, you might start by asking, is it possible to have too much memory? This kind of pre-question helps students orient themselves and understand what to listen for. Research even suggests that using these kinds of questions in low-stakes quizzes before and after lectures can significantly improve learning.
So, it's about setting a mental stage for the information that's about to come. What about during the lecture itself? How do you maintain engagement and help students process the information effectively?
Clear organization is absolutely essential. Think of your lecture as having a clear structure, almost like a well-written essay, with clear headings and subheadings that you explicitly point out. Incorporate periodic summaries of what you've covered so far. This gives students a chance to consolidate their understanding and identify any areas of confusion. Don't be afraid to repeat key concepts. Repetition aids memory. Consider breaking longer lectures into smaller segments with brief activities or opportunities for questions. However, be mindful of what our sources call seductive details.
Ah, yes.
Interesting but ultimately irrelevant anecdotes that can distract from the core learning objectives. And always encourage students to connect the material to their own experiences by asking for examples.
Mini lectures with built-in pauses for processing, that sounds much more effective than just continuous information flow. What about the end of a lecture? How should instructors wrap things up effectively?
The conclusion is your chance to reinforce the main points and provide a sense of closure. Always summarize the key takeaways, perhaps by briefly revisiting the main headings you outlined at the beginning. Encourage students to ask any lingering questions. You can also pose questions yourself to check their understanding. Looking ahead is also valuable. Briefly previewing what will be covered in the next class or assigned readings can create anticipation and help students see the bigger picture. A good technique to gauge understanding is the minute paper, asking students to spend a minute writing down the most important thing they learned during the lecture.
So the lecture should have a clear beginning, middle, and end, just like a good story. Now, a common criticism of lectures is the often passive role of the students. They're mostly just taking notes. How can instructors make lectures more active?
You're right. In a traditional lecture, students can easily become passive recipients of information. While note-taking is a common strategy, it doesn't always guarantee deep engagement. That's where active learning techniques can be incredibly valuable, even within a lecture format. A prime example is the use of personal response systems, often called clickers. These allow instructors to pose questions throughout the lecture, and students can respond anonymously. The aggregated results can then be displayed to the class, sparking discussion and revealing areas of common understanding or confusion. Even low-tech alternatives, like using colored index cards to signal agreement or disagreement, can achieve a similar effect. The research consistently shows that incorporating these kinds of interactive elements significantly improves student learning during lectures.
Clickers, I've seen those create some lively discussions. It's about moving beyond just transcribing information to actually thinking about it in real time. How else can instructors encourage that deeper processing during a lecture?
Well, asking rhetorical questions that prompt students to think critically, pointing out the connections between different concepts, or asking students to generate their own examples of the principles you're discussing are all effective strategies. You can also pause and ask students to discuss a concept with a neighbor for a minute or two before continuing. These short bursts of interaction can really break up the passivity of a traditional lecture and encourage deeper engagement with the material.
So even within the lecture format, there are definitely ways to foster a more dynamic and thoughtful learning experience. Now let's talk about how we assess whether all this teaching is actually leading to learning. Assessment. It's not just about assigning grades at the end, is it?
Absolutely not. Effective assessment should be viewed as an integral part of the learning process itself, not just a final judgment. Regular assessment throughout a course provides valuable feedback to both students and the instructor. It helps students understand their progress, identify areas where they need to focus more attention, and motivates them to stay engaged. For the instructor, it offers insights into what students are actually learning and whether the teaching methods are effective.
So it's an ongoing feedback loop that informs both teaching and learning. How do instructors design effective assessment strategies?
The key is to align your assessment methods with your course goals and learning objectives. What do you want students to be able to do by the end of the course? Once you have a clear understanding of your goals, you can choose assessment methods that effectively measure those outcomes. Don't be afraid to move beyond traditional exams. Consider a variety of assessments, such as written assignments, projects, presentations, portfolios, or even more frequent, lower-stakes quizzes. This variety can provide a more comprehensive picture of student learning and cater to different learning styles.
That makes sense. Different ways for students to demonstrate their understanding. Our sources also touch on the institutional reasons for assessing student learning. That's a perspective I hadn't really considered.
Yes, most higher education institutions are increasingly focused on demonstrating the effectiveness of their programs and courses in achieving specific learning outcomes. The assessments you conduct in your classroom contribute to this broader institutional assessment, which is often required for accreditation purposes. By thoughtfully designing your assessments, you're not only gauging student learning, but also providing valuable data that can inform program improvement and ensure the overall quality of education. If you can design assessments that serve both purposes, enhancing student learning and providing useful data for the institution, that's ideal.
So the assessments we use have a ripple effect beyond the individual student. Beyond traditional tests and papers, what are some other methods of assessing learning that our sources highlight as being particularly effective?
Well, reflective journals, where students regularly write about their learning process, their understanding of concepts, and their connections to the material, can provide valuable qualitative insights into their development. Portfolios, which are collections of student work over time, can showcase their progress and mastery of skills in a more holistic way than a single exam. Peer assessment, where students evaluate each other's work based on clearly defined criteria, is another powerful tool. It not only provides the instructor with additional feedback, but also helps students develop a deeper understanding of the learning objectives and improve their own critical thinking and self-assessment skills. Imagine students in a writing course providing feedback on drafts. They learn just as much about effective writing by analyzing their peers' work as they do from receiving feedback on their own.
Peer assessment, that sounds like a great way to make students more invested in the assessment process itself. Now, when it comes to actual testing, there are a lot of details to consider. When is the most effective time to administer tests? Testing early and often, especially with low-stakes quizzes, can be very beneficial. An ungraded quiz in the first week can help gauge prior knowledge and get students oriented. A lightly weighted graded test early in the semester can help identify any initial misunderstandings before they become major problems, and can also encourage students to start engaging with the material early on. Early tests should also reflect the types of learning activities you emphasize throughout the course.
So, setting the expectation for ongoing engagement right from the beginning. What about the different formats of test questions, multiple choice, essay, short answer? Each has its strengths and weaknesses, right? Absolutely. Short answer questions can effectively assess recall and understanding without the guesswork of multiple choice options, and they can also tap into basic analytical skills. True-false questions, while easy to score, often test only basic recall and can have issues with guessing. Multiple choice questions can cover a broad range of material and assess different levels of understanding, but designing good multiple choice questions is crucial to avoid ambiguity and superficial recall. Essay questions are excellent for evaluating students' ability to synthesize information, organize their thoughts, and construct arguments, but they can be more time-consuming and subjective to grade.
So, a strategic mix of question types is probably the best approach, depending on what specific learning outcomes you're trying to measure. Our sources also offer advice from the student's perspective on how to approach taking tests. That's a nice touch that instructors might find helpful to share.
Yes, Things like advising students to read all the options in a multiple-choice question carefully before selecting an answer, to identify keywords and plan the response before writing an essay, and to manage their time effectively during the exam can make a significant difference in their performance and reduce test anxiety. Instructors can also help by being transparent about the test format, the types of questions they'll encounter, and the grading criteria well in advance of the test. Providing study tips and even offering some stress reduction techniques can create a more supportive testing environment.
It's about making the testing process more transparent and less of a high-stakes mystery. Now, unfortunately, the issue of cheating sometimes arises in academic settings. What preventative measures can instructors take to minimize this?
Yeah, it's a tough one. But there are several proactive steps instructors can take. Using different versions of the same test, varying the order of questions or answer choices, and ensuring adequate proctoring during exams can all act as deterrents. Clearly communicating your institution's policies on academic dishonesty and the consequences of cheating at the beginning of the course is also essential. Many students report that a well-managed testing environment actually reduces the perceived pressure to cheat.
So, clear rules and a carefully monitored environment can help maintain academic integrity. What about if an instructor suspects a student of cheating during an exam? How should that situation be handled?
It's a delicate situation that requires discretion. The immediate action should be subtle to avoid publicly accusing a student who might be innocent. Often, simply asking the student privately to move to a different seat can address a potential issue without direct confrontation. It's crucial for instructors to be familiar with their institution's specific policies and procedures for handling suspected academic dishonesty and to follow those guidelines if they have strong evidence of cheating.
It sounds like a process that needs to be handled with care and adherence to established protocols. What happens after the test is over when it comes to grading? Are there any best practices instructors should keep in mind?
For objective tests, the most important thing is to ensure the accuracy of your answer key. Double-check it carefully. Conducting an item analysis, looking at how students performed on each individual question, can reveal potentially problematic questions that might have been confusing or poorly worded. For essay tests, using rubrics' clear scoring guidelines can significantly improve grading consistency, but avoid relying on them too rigidly. Your overall impression of the quality of the response is also valuable. If you have teaching assistants, team grading can help establish shared grading criteria and increase fairness.
Team grading an interesting way to mitigate individual biases. Finally, how should instructors handle students who are unhappy with their grades and want to contest them?
Yes. The first step is always to listen carefully to the student's concerns without becoming defensive. Ask them to explain their reasoning and where they believe the grading might have been inaccurate. Even if you ultimately decide not to change the grade, shifting the focus of the conversation towards future learning can be helpful. Discuss alternative study strategies they could try for future assignments and encourage them to take ownership of their learning process. While these conversations can be challenging, they are a crucial part of the instructor's role.
So listen first, then focus on constructive steps forward rather than just getting bogged down in defending the grade. Now, grades are just one form of feedback. What about other ways instructors can provide effective feedback that actually helps students learn and improve?
You're right. Feedback goes far beyond just a letter grade. Effective feedback is timely, focused, and most importantly, actionable. It should provide specific guidance on what the student did well and what they can do to improve. Think of feedback as a conversation, even if it's written. The goal is to help the learner understand their strengths and weaknesses and guide their future learning. This means making your feedback contingent on the individual learner's needs. What kind of feedback will be most helpful to the student at this stage?
Feedback as a personalized learning tool. How can instructors create more opportunities for this kind of feedback exchange?
Creating opportunities for feedback dialogues is key. This could involve scheduling brief individual meetings with students to discuss their work, or even encouraging them to come to office hours with specific questions. It's also incredibly valuable to supplement teacher feedback with peer feedback. As we discussed earlier with peer assessment, having students provide constructive criticism to each other can offer different perspectives and enhance their own understanding of the criteria for success. Collaborative work on assignments naturally creates opportunities for this kind of ongoing peer feedback.
Collaborative projects with built-in peer review, that sounds like a really effective way to weave feedback into the learning process. Now, shifting our focus, our sources dedicate significant attention to teaching culturally diverse students. This is such an important aspect of today's classrooms. What are some fundamental things instructors need to be aware of?
Understanding and respecting the diverse backgrounds and experiences of all your students is absolutely paramount. Be mindful that nonverbal communication cues like eye contact can vary significantly across cultures. What might be seen as attentiveness in one culture could be perceived as disrespectful in another. When soliciting verbal participation, be aware of the concept of reluctant speech. Some students might come from cultural backgrounds where speaking up frequently in class is not the norm. Employ strategies like allowing for brief, low-stakes contributions or indicating that students don't need to stand up to speak can help create a more comfortable environment for everyone.
So, being aware that communication styles and comfort levels can be culturally influenced, what about more nuanced communication patterns like circular communication?
Circular communication, where the answer to a direct question might be approached indirectly, can sometimes be frustrating for instructors from more direct communication cultures. It's important to be aware that this style might be influenced by cultural norms and to be patient and seek clarification when needed. Also, remember that motivation can be deeply rooted in cultural values. For some students, particularly those from collectivist cultures, family goals and the desire to contribute to their community might be stronger motivators than individual achievement.
That's a really important point, understanding that individualistic appeals might not resonate with all students. Our sources also touch on the imposter issue and the experiences of first-generation students in the context of cultural diversity.
Yes, students from underrepresented groups may be more prone to experiencing imposter syndrome, that feeling of self-doubt and fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite their accomplishments. Negative stereotypes and societal biases can exacerbate these feelings. First-generation students, who are the first in their families to attend college, might face unique challenges navigating the unfamiliar landscape of higher education, and may lack the social capital or familial guidance that other students might have.
It's about recognizing and addressing these often invisible barriers that some students face. What are some practical strategies for fostering motivation and adapting teaching methods to better support diverse learners?
Well, emphasizing group work and collaborative projects can be particularly motivating for students from collectivist backgrounds. Explicitly connecting course material to broader social issues or community needs can also increase engagement for students who are driven by a desire to make a positive impact. Be mindful of different learning preferences. While the concept of rigid learning styles is debated, recognizing that some students might learn better through visual aids, others through auditory input, and others through hands-on activities can inform your teaching approach. Finally, remember that for some minority students, teachers can be incredibly influential figures, providing guidance and support beyond just academics.
Creating an inclusive and supportive learning environment where diverse students feel valued and understood is clearly crucial. Now, beyond cultural differences, students also bring a range of other individual challenges to the classroom. Our sources discuss students at different stages of cognitive development, as well as those who might be underprepared or struggling with attention.
Yeah, it's important to remember that students arrive in college with varying levels of cognitive maturity. Some might still be in a stage where they seek definitive answers and struggle with ambiguity and complexity. For underprepared students, providing access to supplemental resources, encouraging the formation of study groups, and utilizing online discussion forums for peer support can be very helpful. For students who struggle with inattention, strategies like varying instructional activities frequently, incorporating more interactive elements into lectures, and even being mindful of seating arrangements can make a difference. Clear expectations about the level of preparation required for each class are also essential.
Addressing these different starting points and engagement levels seems like a significant part of effective teaching. What about the emotional challenges students might face, like anger, discouragement after a setback, or strong emotional reactions to sensitive course material? How should instructors navigate those situations?
These situations require sensitivity and a focus on creating a safe and respectful learning environment. When dealing with an angry student, remaining calm and setting clear boundaries is crucial. For students who are feeling discouraged, try to connect them with available support resources, acknowledge their effort, and emphasize their progress rather than focusing solely on perceived failures. When discussing emotionally charged topics, acknowledge the potential for different reactions, establish clear guidelines for respectful discourse, and consider using structured activities that allow for the exploration of different perspectives in a controlled manner. It's also important for instructors to be aware of and able to direct students to mental health resources available on campus.
Recognizing and responding to the emotional well-being of students is clearly an integral part of teaching. Now, we've touched on the benefits of active learning throughout our conversation. Our sources have a dedicated chapter on leveraging it and the role of technology in enhancing learning. What are the core advantages of active learning approaches?
The primary benefit of active learning, where students are actively engaged in the learning process rather than passively receiving information, is deeper and more meaningful learning. When students are actively involved, they process information more thoroughly, make connections to prior knowledge, and are better able to retain what they learn. Group-based learning strategies, such as peer learning, where students learn from and teach each other, learning cells, where students alternate between listening and summarizing, and think, pair, share, all foster active engagement. It's important to design these activities with both individual and group accountability in mind. Experiential learning, like case studies, problem-based learning, and simulations, provides opportunities for students to apply their knowledge in real-world contexts, enhancing transfer of learning. Even different forms of writing, beyond formal essays, such as low-stakes writing assignments or creative writing tasks, can be powerful tools for active learning.
So it's about moving students from being passive consumers of knowledge to active participants in constructing their own understanding. And writing can be a much more versatile tool for learning than I had previously considered. What about the role of technology in all of this? How can instructors leverage technology effectively?
Technology offers a wealth of tools that can enhance learning by creating new avenues for interaction, collaboration, and access to information. Learning management systems can serve as central hubs for course materials and communication. Tools like blogs and wikis can facilitate collaborative writing and knowledge building. Web conferencing platforms can extend learning beyond the physical classroom. However, the key is that any technology integration should be driven by clear pedagogical goals. Don't use technology just for the sake of using it. Presentation software can help organize lectures, but incorporating interactive elements like polls or quizzes can keep students engaged. Personal response systems, as we discussed earlier, are another powerful example of technology that promotes active learning.
So technology is a tool, and like any tool, its effectiveness depends on how intentionally and purposefully it's used to support learning objectives. Now, teaching large classes presents its own unique set of hurdles. Is it still possible to incorporate active learning strategies in a lecture hall with hundreds of students?
Absolutely. While it might seem challenging, the idea that large classes necessitate only lecturing and objective tests is a misconception. There are many effective active learning techniques that can be adapted for larger groups. Incorporating brief writing assignments that students don't necessarily turn in, but that help them process information, using think, pair, share with a few students sharing their discussions with the larger group, conducting brief aisle interactions where you pose a question and have students discuss it with those around them, and even organizing informal discussion sections led by teaching assistants can all foster engagement in large classes. Techniques to reduce student anonymity, such as using name tents or online forums where students can introduce themselves, can also help create a more connected learning environment.
So it's about finding scalable ways to create those moments of active engagement, even in a large setting. What about more specialized instructional contexts, like laboratory courses? What are some key principles for effective lab instruction?
Labs provide a unique hands-on opportunity for students to experience scientific phenomena directly and develop their understanding through experimentation. Inquiry-based instruction, where students are encouraged to formulate their own research questions and design their own experiments, is often more effective than traditional cookbook labs with predetermined procedures and expected outcomes. Studio instruction, which integrates theoretical learning with practical application in a single space, is also becoming more common in various disciplines. And there's a growing trend towards incorporating authentic research experiences into undergraduate labs, giving students a taste of real scientific investigation.
So labs should be more than just following a protocol. They should be about fostering scientific thinking and discovery. Now, our sources also emphasize the importance of strategic learning, helping students become more effective and self-directed learners. What role do instructors play in cultivating these skills?
Instructors have a crucial role in helping students develop their learning-to-learn skills. This involves making students more aware of their own learning processes, explicitly teaching domain-specific learning strategies, helping them connect new information to their existing knowledge, modeling effective learning strategies in your own teaching practices, and providing feedback on how students are approaching their learning, helping students set realistic and meaningful goals for the course, and demonstrating the relevance of the material to their broader academic or career aspirations can also significantly enhance their motivation and effort.
It's about empowering students to become more effective navigators of their own learning journeys. What are some specific examples of learning strategies that instructors can explicitly teach and model for their students?
Well, simple strategies like encouraging regular review and spaced repetition of material can significantly improve retention. More complex strategies include techniques for organizing information, such as creating concept maps or outlines, and elaboration strategies, like paraphrasing information in their own words or generating analogies to make abstract concepts more concrete. As instructors, we can model these strategies by explicitly thinking aloud during problem solving, showing students how we approach a complex reading, or explaining why we're using a particular organizational structure in our lectures. Providing feedback on how students are using learning strategies in their assignments, not just on the content itself, can also be very effective.
So, making the invisible process of learning more visible and providing guidance on how to do it effectively. Finally, our sources delve into the complex area of teaching thinking. There's often a concern about whether higher education is truly developing students' critical thinking skills.
That's a valid concern, and there's ongoing debate about how effectively colleges and universities are fostering higher-order thinking skills. Employers often voice a desire for graduates with stronger critical thinking abilities. While there might be different perspectives on the extent of the issue, there's a general consensus on the importance of teaching thinking. However, the field of thinking pedagogy can sometimes feel a bit fragmented, with different disciplines emphasizing different aspects of critical thinking. Frameworks like Bloom's taxonomy can provide a useful structure for understanding different levels of cognitive complexity and setting expectations for thinking skills in your course. It's also important to recognize that thinking skills develop gradually over time in college and are influenced by factors like motivation, prior knowledge, and the complexity of the subject matter.
It's a multifaceted skill that evolves over a student's academic career. What are some practical and actionable suggestions for instructors who want to actively foster critical thinking in their classrooms?
Encourage students to ask probing questions, to analyze arguments and identify underlying assumptions, to evaluate the quality of evidence, and to consider multiple perspectives on an issue. Be patient with students who might initially struggle with more complex levels of thinking. It's a developmental process that requires practice and guidance. Try to make the process engaging by using real-world problems and case studies, and highlight the intellectual satisfaction that comes from grappling with complex ideas.
So it's about guiding students through increasingly challenging levels of intellectual engagement and cultivating a habit of critical inquiry. Our final chapter addresses the importance of lifelong learning for teachers themselves and the ethical considerations inherent in the teaching profession.
Yes, just as we encourage our students to be lifelong learners, it's crucial for us as educators to remain curious, to seek out new ideas and teaching methods, and to continuously strive to improve our practice. Actively soliciting feedback from students through various means, such as anonymous feedback forms or more in-depth small group instructional diagnosis sessions, can provide valuable insights. Ethical considerations are also paramount in teaching. Our responsibilities to our students include treating them with respect, ensuring fair and transparent evaluation practices, and maintaining the highest standards of academic honesty. Be mindful of potential ethical dilemmas that might arise, and always prioritize building trust and respect in your relationships with students.
So continuous professional growth and a strong ethical compass are essential for effective educators. Well, this has truly been a comprehensive deep dive into the multifaceted world of effective teaching and learning in higher education. It's remarkable how much thought and research goes into creating effective learning environments. The key takeaways for me are the absolute centrality of understanding the learner, the power of active engagement, and the sheer variety of strategies that instructors can employ to foster deeper learning.
And it's so important to remember that becoming a more effective teacher and a more effective learner is an ongoing journey of reflection and adaptation.
So for you, our listener, as you process this deep dive, think about one of your own learning experiences, whether it was particularly positive or frustrating, and consider how the principles we've discussed might shed new light on it. What was your biggest aha moment about how learning works or how educators can make a real difference? We encourage you to continue exploring the fascinating dynamics of teaching and learning in your own life. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.